Have you ever felt like something or someone is always watching you, even when everything seems quiet? That some choices, made with a racing heart and hopeful eyes, can end up costing far more than you ever imagined? Yeah. Not every escape brings freedom. Some promises are wrapped in sweetness, but hide thorns you can't see until it's too late. This is the story of Josefina. Just a regular girl with big dreams, who thought she found a way out when she ran away with Leopoldo. What she didn't realize was that she wasn't escaping, she was stepping into a world where the real and the supernatural collide, where a quiet country ranch hides dark secrets, and a kind-hearted employer is actually the gateway to something much deeper and far more dangerous. Get ready for a gripping journey filled with rituals, unspoken pacts, and a spiritual haunting that defies reason. This isn't a horror movie. It's not fiction. It's a raw chain of loss, pain, and temptation that could happen to anyone. You might doubt it at first, but by the end, you'll be questioning every coincidence in your own life. Josefina was just 18 when she decided to leave everything behind. The house she grew up in was more like a war zone than a home. Yelling, slammed doors, and stares that cut deeper than words. She ran away with Leopoldo, her teenage love, believing they could build a new life together. With no clear destination, they stumbled upon a remote ranch, nestled in the green of the mountains, wrapped in a silence that felt promising. It was the beginning of a freedom full of unanswered questions. Time felt different on the ranch. Life was simple, even harsh at times, but there was a raw beauty to their routine, waking up to the smell of damp earth, picking fruit straight from the trees, and watching the sun set like it was a private show. Despite the hardships, Josefina felt alive, maybe for the first time ever. Leopoldo was her rock. They worked side by side, dreaming big even while their boots sank in the mud. The hope for better days kept them steady, smiling through blisters and exhaustion. But hey, race the thing: when you run away, you don't just leave a place behind. Sometimes, you carry the ghosts with you. Josefina still jolted awake from memories of her old home. And the ranch, so quiet, so peaceful, began to hum with a strange heaviness, like the silence itself was watching. Nothing obvious, just unsettling. And then came the woman. At first, she seemed like just another piece of the puzzle. But she was the one who'd open a door not to salvation, but to something far more twisted. Ernestina's arrival felt like a blessing. A strong woman with a soft voice and sharp eyes, she owned a small nearby farm. Josefina, needing some extra income, agreed to help with the household chores. Ernestina taught her everything: how to dry healing herbs, how to cook up old family remedies that cure anything, as she'd say. With time, she treated Josefina like a goddaughter, like she saw a younger version of herself in the girl. Their bond grew quickly, fast and wild, like weeds in fertile ground. But something about Ernestina's daily routine didn't sit right. Candles burned even during daylight. Mirrors were always covered at night. And she had this strange habit of whispering to herself, like she was waiting for an answer from somewhere not here. Josefina got curious, suspicious even, and started asking questions. Ernestina would just smile that cryptic smile and say, "Some things you don't explain. You feel." And little by little, she revealed an entire hidden world: brujeria. Witchcraft, she said, older than the soil beneath their feet. On Sundays, while the rest of the town was at church, Ernestina would take Josefina deep into the forest. There, she taught her how to make offerings, how to feel the pulse of the earth, and how to ask with faith. It didn't feel evil, in fact, it felt sacred. Like Josefina was tapping into something ancient, feminine, secret. But there was always this strange fog hanging in the air. And certain words started slipping into conversation: pact, black magic, sacrifice. like clues in a dangerous game. It was clear this was just the beginning. As time passed, Ernestina stopped speaking in riddles. One foggy morning, she asked Josefina directly, "What do you really want? A regular life? Or real power?" It hit hard. It was like she could read Josefina's mind, her deepest desires. The truth was, the ranch didn't feed their dreams, it barely fed their bodies. And the idea of a prosperous future still felt far off. Ernestina spoke with absolute certainty. Hard work is fine. But effort alone doesn't move mountains. Everything has a price. That's when Josefina began to see the other side of the blessings Ernestina had spoken of. They weren't just old remedies or harmless rituals. These were serious ceremonies with specific offerings, exact dates, and dangerously focused intentions. Ernestina explained it all like a seasoned teacher. She talked about supernatural temptation the same way others talked about business deals. "Some truths the church won't tell you," she'd say. "But the forest does." Josefina couldn't tell anymore if she was being taught or seduced. But stopping? That was already off the table. It was like opening a book that could never be closed again. And honestly, that's when she should have turned around and run. But she didn't. She stayed. Listening. Trying things out. A bath with herbs here, a black candle there. And weirdly things started working. A debt vanished. A fever broke. A sale came out of nowhere. Ernestina watched with a proud, quiet grin like a hunter watching her cub learn to stalk prey. "Now you understand," she'd whisper. But with every ritual came a quiet warning: everything you ask for will be paid back. And that payment? It's rarely in money. The first signs were subtle. Almost too easy to dismiss. Josefina thought she was just tired. A shadow in the corner of her eye, the scent of burned wax deep in the woods, a muffled whisper in the stillness of night. But it kept happening. Always at dusk, when the light grew golden and the sounds of the land faded away. That's when she'd see it, the silhouette of a woman. Hunched, cloaked in black, standing in the same exact spot between the ranch and the edge of the woods. Josefina tried to ignore it. But she felt it in her bones. That hunched witch was there for her. Over time, the distant became close. One morning, Josefina woke up to the sound of footsteps inside the ranch. She ran to check, but no one was there, or at least, no one living. The smell of damp soil mixed with sulfur was so strong it nearly knocked her out. On the table, a melted black candle and a single braided strand of hair shaped like a spiral. Only Leopoldo had the key. This wasn't a break-in. This was a message. When Ernestina heard about it, all she said was, "She's seen you now. From here on out, she'll follow you everywhere." From that point on, the witch's presence became a part of everyday life. Josefina caught glimpses of her in mirrors. Felt chills even on the hottest days. Heard voices in languages she'd never studied. The hunched bruja never spoke, she just stared, like she was waiting for an answer that didn't need to be said out loud. And slowly, Josefina understood. This wasn't a haunting. It was a calling. And pretending it wasn't real? That option had long expired. Something old, dark, and inevitable had been set in motion, and she was at the center of it. The bruja never uttered a word, but she didn't need to. Her eyes, black and bottomless, whispered promises and threats in the same glance. Josefina felt her presence like a shadow clinging to her back. One full moon night, she dreamed of a ritual. She was kneeling in front of the witch, hands stained with blood, a dead animal at her feet. When she woke up, the dream felt less like fiction and more like a memory. And in that moment, without a single signature, the pact was sealed. Not with ink. With intent. After that, the instructions didn't come in words, they came as instincts. Josefina just started knowing things. She'd feel which candle to light, which herb to choose, what to chant. Without ever being taught. The witch had become her companion, her silent guide down a path with no return. Ernestina, now more of a spectator, watched from a distance like someone who'd seen it all before. As if she'd passed the torch. And Josefina had picked it up. But with growing power came the weight and the cost. At first, it felt too good. The garden thrived. Money flowed in. Leopoldo picked up more work. Their life finally seemed to be falling into place. But Josefina felt like something else was carrying her. Pushing her forward without asking where she wanted to go. And even though she never said yes out loud, deep down she knew the silent pact had fused with her body. It was a living promise. And like all promises made to darkness, it would demand its price. Soon, the rewards started blooming sweet and abundant. The once dry, stubborn ranch flourished with unnatural fertility. Chickens laid more eggs. The soil gave more than it should. Crops arrived early, out of season. Debts vanished like smoke. Josefina forgot what it felt like to struggle. But with every stroke of luck came that creeping feeling. Like each blessing carried a hidden debt. It was like winning the lottery with a found ticket way too lucky. And luck like that always comes with a backstory. Josefina tried to keep up appearances, to hold on to some routine. Pretend that life was normal. But the weight of that dark presence was always there. The witch didn't show up every day, but Josefina felt her in her gut, in her bones, crawling up her spine. Leopoldo, blissfully unaware, thought things were finally falling into place. He talked about having kids, expanding the ranch, maybe buying a tractor. Josefina would smile. On the outside. But inside, fear whispered, none of this is really yours. It was borrowed. And everything borrowed must be repaid. Even the sweetest blessings can taste like blood. The most twisted part? The silence of the pact. There were no terms, no contract to reread. Just this constant, gnawing sense of debt. And worse, of ownership. Josefina could no longer tell where she ended and the hunched witch's influence began. It was like walking through a minefield, masked with flowers. Every joy, every win, every little moment of peace came with an invisible footnote: this wasn't free. The bill is coming. And she started to fear the payment wouldn't be in money. It happened on a clear morning. The late period was already suspicious, but it was the sudden wave of nausea right as she was cutting fresh rue that made her freeze. An old herbal method confirmed what her body had been shouting: she was pregnant. Leopoldo lit up like a child. He hugged her, started making plans, picking names, painting a nursery in his mind. But Josefina couldn't smile back. Deep down, with a clarity that crushed her, she knew this wasn't a gift. It was a demand. And it came straight from the silent pact she'd unknowingly sealed. That night, the witch came closer than ever. She stood at the foot of the bed, completely still. She said nothing as always. But the look in her eyes was more than enough. Josefina understood without a word: the child was the offering. There was no room for doubt. The entity wanted life in return for what it had given. The promise was ancient, brutal, and clear: those who receive must give. Those who prosper must pay. And now, Josefina had something valuable enough to settle her debt. The realization hit her like a dry lightning bolt to the chest. Josefina tried praying, lighting white candles, begging for a different path. But everything felt powerless, as if even the light itself no longer recognized her. Leopoldo saw nothing. He was drunk on the joy of becoming a father. Meanwhile, she was drowning in silence. Night after night, she dreamed of the birth, but instead of joy, she saw screams, blood, the witch cradling the baby in her arms. It felt like fate was already written. There was no way to protect that life without breaking a bond far greater than her will. And breaking the pact felt truly impossible. She made the decision in a silence that burned. No advice. No goodbyes. Josefina knew no one would understand, not even herself. She gathered everything Ernestina had taught her: the right herbs, the right moon, the quiet sob of someone burying more than a secret. She performed the ritual alone, like digging her own grave with bare hands. In the cold moonlit woods, she gave up what hurt her the most: her child. There was no scream. Just a hollow so deep, it felt like her soul was being pulled into the earth. The witch didn't show up that night. She didn't need to. She was already everywhere. The days that followed were a constant haze. Her body ached in a way that felt like something had been ripped out of her. Josefina was bleeding inside and out, and no one could see. Leopoldo thought she was sick. She never corrected him. How could she say she had taken her own child's life? That she had turned her womb into an altar for an offering? The weight of solitude settled on her shoulders like stone. She spent her nights awake, listening to whispers and the phantom cries of an infant, even though there was nothing there. The whole ranch felt like it was mourning. And the worst part? The secret. There was no relief. Only guilt. And guilt, that kind of guilt, infects the heart like a plague and turns everything into desert. Josefina stopped eating. Stopped smiling. Stopped looking anyone in the eye. She felt the pact had been partially fulfilled but not closed. It was like she had bought herself more time, not freedom. The hunched witch still lingered, circling, watching. And now, alongside the debt, there was grief. A grief no one else could see, but that screamed with every step she took. Then came the final blow. It was a hot, suffocating afternoon. Leopoldo had gone to check the back fence and didn't return. Josefina, heart-pounding, went to look for him. She found him lying on the ground, covered in hundreds of bee stings. They had swarmed him like a curse, without warning, without reason. The scene was horrific, his face swollen, eyes still open, as if he'd died, not understanding why he was being punished. But Josefina knew. Deep down, she knew. This wasn't nature. It was the price. An added payment, maybe, for hesitating. Or trying to escape. The funeral was simple. But the emptiness it left behind was unbearable. The ranch, once full of life, now felt like an open grave. Josefina wandered through the rooms like a ghost of herself. She kept replaying everything in her mind, trying to find the exact moment when it all began to unravel. It was the pact, she whispered between sobs. It was the pact. And with each passing day, her conviction grew stronger. The witch didn't accept half promises. The abortion hadn't been enough. The dark presence still wanted more. Always more. Her grief mutated into a new kind of fear, the fear that no one else was safe. If the entity could take Leopoldo like that, what was stopping it from taking others? A friend, a neighbor, anyone who got too close? Josefina became completely isolated, not just by guilt, but by the constant threat of more loss. The hunched witch appeared more often now, always in the same spot where Leopoldo used to sit, as if mocking the pain. Josefina, drained and hollow, began to fade slowly, silently, like a candle burning out in a locked room. Leopoldo's death was the final straw. The townspeople, who had once kept their distance, now looked at her with disgust and fear. Rumors spread like wildfire. She was a witch, she did rituals in the woods, sold her soul. No one spoke to her anymore. Children were forbidden to walk past her house. Neighbors crossed the road to avoid her shadow. Social rejection fell on her like a curse, heavy, inescapable. There was no more space for her there. And the truth was, maybe there wasn't space for her anywhere. With nowhere else to turn, she left the ranch. Took only the basics: a frail body and hollow eyes. She moved to a distant village, hoping to start over, pretending to be someone else. But the darkness didn't stay behind. The witch followed her. She didn't walk. She didn't speak. She appeared in mirrors, in smells, in dreams. The spiritual haunting never stopped. Josefina could change her location, but never her fate. No matter how carefully she hid her past, the pact clung to her like a second skin. In the new town, she tried to live quietly, sewing for others, picking herbs, keeping her distance. But the rumors traveled faster than she could run. "Beware the woman from the ranch," they whispered. They said milk spoiled when she walked by, babies cried in her presence, dogs howled when she passed. It was like the spiritual curse leaked from her pores. No matter how silent she stayed, the darkness she carried spoke louder than words. And so, once again, Josefina found herself alone. Alone with her rituals, her memories, and the growing certainty that the entity would never stop hunting her. The visions changed. The witch no longer just watched, she tempted. Not with words, but with burning desires. Josefina felt it like a fever in her skull, flashes of a perfect life, a house full of laughter and children, peace, love, abundance. Everything she had lost played before her like a cruel theater. And behind it all, a whisper buried deep in her soul: surrender completely. It was a promise, but also a trap. And deep down, Josefina knew saying yes would mean losing herself entirely. Every refusal brought punishment. First came the pain in her joints, her back, her teeth. Doctors blamed it on nerves, on stress, said it was all in her head. But Josefina knew better. They were warnings. Then came the unexplained illnesses, fevers that vanished and returned, skin rashes, sudden blackouts. Her body became a battlefield. And her spirit? That was already exhausted. Nights became torture, shadows, nightmares, and a faceless voice repeating the same phrase: time is running out. The witch didn't want part of her. She wanted all of her. And she wouldn't wait forever. Then came the cruelest part: the loss of little joys. Plants wilted for no reason. Bread molded the same day it was baked. Cats disappeared. People who started to care about her would suddenly vanish too. It was as if life itself was being pruned away one leaf at a time. Josefina no longer felt surrounded by mirrors, but by invisible bars. And even if she did give in to the offer, deep down she knew peace was never part of the deal. Just time. And with certain entities, the game is never fair. The price? It always rises. She tried again to start over. New town, new name, new clothes. Burned everything that smelled of her past. But it was no use. The hunched bruja always found a way back. All it took was a darker night, a candle left burning, or a whisper only she could hear. It was like the entity had taken root inside her. It didn't matter how far she ran or how many prayers she recited. The pact had no expiration. It was a loop. And she was trapped inside it, just one cursed piece in a game that never ends. Now tell me, how many times have you felt like you're paying for choices you don't even fully understand? How often does life feel like a trap you can't break out of? The harder you try to escape, the tighter it grips you. Josefina's story may seem distant, full of pacts, witches, and rituals, but if you look closer, you might just recognize your own invisible deals. Those silent decisions made in moments of impulse that end up costing far more than you thought. Maybe your pact wasn't with dark magic, maybe it was with a toxic relationship, a soul-crushing job, or promises you made to yourself and never kept. So let me ask you, what price are you paying today? And more importantly, how long will you keep pretending that's normal? If this story moved you, made you think, or stirred something deep inside, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Leave a comment below and tell me, what's the hardest pact you have ever made? And of course, if you want more intense, real stories that cut deeper than the surface, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and don't miss the next episode.